Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us here this afternoon. Welcome back after our long lunch. Hope you're feeling rested. We've got an exciting panel today and distinguished guests and lovely audience members that I'm sure are going to interact with us in the second half of this session to discuss Libya and the Sahel, the impossible pacification. Now, this is obviously a subject that is quite close to my heart. I'm Libyan myself. My name is Anas Al-Gumati. I'm the director of the SADC Institute, Libya's first public policy think tank. And so Libya has been at the heart of this subject now for over a decade. And we have a distinguished panel to discuss a variety of perspectives here today. So I want to kick off with a couple of introductory remarks and just give us some conceptual scaffolding to think about and reflect over. Over the last decade, Libya has experienced 3 civil wars, wars against terrorism, migration flows, but it's also become transformed into a great game and a theater for great power competition. And that's something that is moving towards the Sahel over the last several years, as we see Russia's Wagner Group moving in after the withdrawal of the G5 from Mali. So the linkages have been there now for 10 years. Weapons proliferation at the beginning of the last decade, and now we see a new kind of proliferation of great power and great rivalries. In light and in context of what is happening in Ukraine and the subject of this 14th edition of the MEDays, from crises to crises and a new world order, it's interesting to kind of just zoom in on this space and understand where, if anywhere, we know where we're going forward. And that's why I'm delighted to be able to give the floor to our first speaker, His Excellency Mr. Moussa Mara, the former Prime Minister of Mali. Mr. Mara, the floor is yours.
Bien, merci. Je vais m'exprimer en français. Je voudrais d'abord remercier le maître de cérémonie pour son introduction. Il a fait un bon lien entre ce que nous vivons en Libye et ce qui se passe dans le contexte sahélien, puisqu'il y a quelques liens entre les deux situations. Je pense que les autres panélistes peut-être vont intervenir sur la question libyenne. Moi, je ne suis pas un spécialiste de cette question. Donc, je vais plutôt focaliser mon intervention sur le contexte sahélien et puis après, je pense que nous aurons l'occasion d'entrer dans le détail et de discuter. Sur cette introduction, moi, je vais peindre le contexte sahélien et c'est le contexte qui explique pas mal de crises dans lesquelles nous nous trouvons. Et c'est ce contexte qui doit être pris en compte aussi si on veut vraiment essayer de sortir de ces crises de manière structurelle. Le premier facteur important à prendre en compte dans le contexte sahélien, c'est le facteur démographique. Les différents pays sahéliens se caractérisent par des pays à démographie dynamique, voire même très dynamique. Ce qui a une incidence en termes d'augmentation de la population, et augmentation de la population qui est combinée par une urbanisation qui est aussi très rapide et voire même sans précédent. Donc nous avons de plus en plus de populations urbaines, jeunes, connectées et qui malheureusement font face à une situation de pauvreté endémique. Puisque l'autre élément du contexte sahélien, ce sont les changements climatiques et la perte progressive des ressources naturelles. Si je prends l'exemple, par exemple, de mon pays, le Mali, nous avons perdu 2/3 de notre couvert végétal en 30 ans. Nous avions 16 millions d'hectares de forêt. 30 ans plus tard, nous avons aujourd'hui 7 millions et un peu moins de 7 millions d'hectares de forêt. Le Niger est dans la même situation, le Tchad est dans la même situation, et ce qui arrive au lac Tchad, je pense que ça montre bien les impacts des changements climatiques. Donc vous avez un contexte où il y a une augmentation de la population et d'autre part une diminution des ressources naturelles. Donc ce qui fait une pression de plus en plus importante sur le peu de ressources naturelles qui existent sur l'ensemble de la zone sahélienne. C'est un élément de contexte important à prendre en compte. Le deuxième élément de contexte à prendre en compte à l'échelle sahélienne, ce sont les formations étatiques qui ont des difficultés à gérer la grande diversité des populations. La plupart des nations sahéliennes sont des nations diverses, sur le plan ethnique, sur le plan culturel, sur le plan des activités économiques, mais les États ne sont pas structurés véritablement pour prendre en compte ces grandes diversités. Ce qui crée des chocs, par exemple des rébellions ou d'autres types de chocs, sont la conséquence de l'incapacité des États à faire face à la diversité des sociétés. Donc des chocs internes et des sources de déstabilisation interne importantes sur la zone sahélienne. C'est un facteur à prendre en compte aussi. Troisième facteur à prendre en compte, la question des frontières dans le Sahel de manière générale. Vous savez que nos États sont des États colonisés, les frontières ne sont pas véritablement naturelles, acceptées. Et les États considèrent les frontières comme des zones de rupture, alors que les populations les considèrent comme des zones de continuité. Donc il y a une différence d'appréciation des frontières qui font que les États n'arrivent pas à traiter la question frontalière et les populations vivent le tout naturellement du monde autour des zones frontalières. Et les groupes armés et les groupes terroristes ont l'intelligence de comprendre la question frontalière, totalement oublier la zone frontalière et prendre ces zones comme des continuités, ce qu'elles sont véritablement. Les États n'y arrivent pas. C'est un élément de contexte à prendre en compte aussi. Autre élément de contexte à prendre en compte, évidemment, l'incapacité des États à s'adapter à l'évolution des menaces. La question sécuritaire, les formats de nos armées ne sont pas vraiment adaptés à des guerres asymétriques et à traiter avec la question sécuritaire. Donc cette incapacité aussi est un facteur de tension qui explique pour une grande partie ce qui arrive aujourd'hui. Maintenant, le maître de cérémonie m'a montré qu'il ne reste plus qu'une minute, donc je vais m'arrêter là. Mais ces contextes sont à prendre en compte pour qui veut véritablement traiter les questions sahéliennes dans le fond et ne pas voir ressurgir demain ou après-demain les mêmes menaces, les mêmes facteurs de tension en les traitant de manière superficielle comme malheureusement beaucoup d'acteurs sont en train de le faire. Donc voilà à peu près ce que je voulais dire en introduction et nous aurons l'occasion d'entrer dans le vif du sujet plus tard. Merci.
Merci à vous. Merci à vous. Thank you so much. I'd like to present Her Excellency Mrs. Emanuela Claudia Del Rey, who is the Special Representative for the Sahel, the European Union. We heard the comments around the demographic explosions and the pressure valve that is happening in the Sahel. Please give us your perspective from the European Union. The floor is yours, Your Excellency.
Well, thank you very much. I very much appreciated the intervention by Musamara because it put the things in context. And I have to say that I'm also happy to say that the European Union has understood all this. And this is why the European Union today is the main partner of the countries of the Sahel. And this is because we are perfectly aware of the issues, the challenges, and we try in our partnership with the countries of the Sahel to find proper solutions. It is not easy for a number of reasons because, as you very well know, unfortunately at the moment the amount of emergency issues in the region is overcoming our possibility to really indulge in development activities. We are always very busy to remain at the side of the population of the Sahelian countries. We are always very busy in trying to solve through our humanitarian aid the emergency crisis. And this is a big problem, of course, because we would like to start a new system by which we can really realize that famous nexus called the nexus between security and development that can at the same time guarantee stability and at the same time obviously as well provide opportunities for development for the future. It is very important to talk about the region of the Sahel in relation to the surrounding countries. It is important because the dynamics internal to the Sahel, of course, are very diversified, and as they are very important for us in the European Union, so much that I usually say, sorry, the noise is very loud. Okay, thank you for stopping. I was saying, as I always say, the Sahel is the real southern frontier of the European Union. This means that, of course, it is also the southern area, which is very important also for the Maghreb, for instance, the countries of the Gulf of Guinea, and of course also for Libya, because as Musamara was saying, the concept of frontiers is very, let's say, porous. It's based on the fact that all the dynamics internal, the positive and also the complex and illegal dynamics within the regions are also shared by all the countries altogether. The relationship with Libya is very complex for a number of reasons. We know that unfortunately there are negative aspects such as the circulation of arms, which is one of the major problems in the countries of the Sahel. Every chief of state will tell you this, because it is one of the major problems that is also feeding not only terrorism but also a system of criminality that is also particularly damaging the societies of Sahel, and therefore to talk about Libya and to try to find common solutions is fundamental. The European Union is particularly engaged. You know that we have a mission in Libya called EUBAM, called European Union mission for border management and for border administration. And it is very important, this mission, because it demonstrates that we are aware of the fact that we have to collaborate. Of course, as regards Libya, I would only want to say that it is important from now on to stop the competition between the different actors. I have been involved when I was Vice Minister in the Libyan negotiations very much, and I have to say that my desire is that we find a common solution, considering that it is of common interest to start stabilizing Libya as well. So to conclude, I want to say that everything is interconnected, everything is interdependent. The European Union, I am proud to affirm, that is aware and has put in place a strategy that can be really incisive, in the sense that can really change the destiny of the region, provided that we find the right formulas to cooperate on the Sahel, in the Sahel, with the Sahel. So I stop here, but we will go more deeply into the details later. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for a wonderful presentation. I think we've heard about the great challenges, this sweet spot between guaranteeing the present security issues, but also looking forward to the future and ensuring that development doesn't come at the cost of security. So I'd love to come back to that question later on, but last but not least, Mr. Olivier Guitta, who is the Managing Director of Global Strat Geopolitical Consulting from London, like myself. So last but not least, please, Mr. Guitta, the floor is yours, 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I will focus my remarks on security and terrorism, and then we can obviously open up the floor to many other areas. But I want to start off with some stats that are really portraying what's been happening and how much the situation has degraded in the Sahel. Since 2019, so 3 years ago, the number of jihadist attacks in the West Sahel has been multiplied by 4. To make it in hard numbers, for 2022, there was 2,800 terror attacks, which is double what was in 2021. 95% of Africa jihadist attacks since 2019 are occurring either in the West Sahel or Somalia. A couple of things have been happening behind the scenes in terms of what the jihadists are feeling they can get away with. So there's been a temptation from several governments in the Sahel to discuss and negotiate with terrorists. So for instance, Al-Qaeda in Islamic Maghreb offered a deal to Burkina Faso to be paid 2 million euros a month in order for them to stop attacks in the country. We will focus now more on the international response to what's been happening. So obviously we had the French Balkan forces in the region that have left Mali but that are still in the Sahel. That has been replaced by the Wagner Russian paramilitary group. Unfortunately, a lot of people are thinking that Russia is the solution and that all the problems of the Sahel are going to go away because they switch from France to Russia. I can tell them it's not going to happen. And we've seen already in the past few months that the territory controlled by the jihadists in the Sahel has increased since Wagner has come to the fore and to the help of some of the country. One aspect that is important as well is you'll see the connection between the different terror groups. And it has been very notable that Al-Shabaab, that is usually portrayed as a purely Somalian group, has been financing other Al-Qaeda-linked groups in the Sahel. So this is to put things in perspective. One last aspect that I want to join up and that will link up to the Libya issue is the foreign intervention. It's obviously not the solution as we've seen. The different armies have not been successful to defeat the asymmetrical movement of jihadists. But what's really important to see is that whether in the Sahel or in Libya, a lot of different actors are waging an international proxy war. So whether it is Turkey, Qatar, Italy, the UAE, France, Russia, and Egypt are all fighting over getting a solution in Libya, and that's not helping at all because they all have an agenda that is not in line with the Libyan aspiration. For me, since 2011, I made the point that Libya is crucial for Africa. If we get Libya right, some of the problems in Africa could go away. This could be the real window of opportunity because there's so much to be done in Libya, so much wealth, but so much to start from scratch that if we get it right, we could kick out a number of jihadist groups that are getting a safe haven in Libya and that are organizing attacks across the border, but also it will feed off and calm the situation with the neighbors. Look at Algeria, for instance, that has amassed 100,000 soldiers at the border with Libya to protect themselves. Chad, Niger, and Mali are also extremely concerned. So Libya might be the solution, but Libya through Libyans and for Libyans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Guitta. So I'm going to come back and ask each one of you a question, and I'll start from the end. And then we're going to turn it around to yourselves in the audience for questions and comments. So, Mr. Guitta, you mentioned that Libya needs a solution. In Berlin in 2020, the Berlin process that kicked off shortly before COVID, all of the international actors involved in Libya's proxy war were there, and the local actors. They signed the deal. Well, the Libyans signed the deal. The foreign actors, principally those that are involved on the military level, Turkey on the one side, France, Russia, and the UAE on the other side, did not respect the arms embargo. And this is a subject, in fact, that Her Excellency mentioned earlier on in terms of getting the coordination right. So, in your view, what could be done to really enforce an arms embargo? What can be done to immunize Libya from foreign interference? Please.
Thank you for the question. I was in Berlin for the conference, so I saw it from the inside, what was going on, and you are totally correct. Whether it's Turkey on one side with their mercenaries or Russia with Wagner, the deal has not been respected, even though the Germans and Angela Merkel made a point that Libya was going to become a priority for the German government. What's at stake here is really a combat between two different countries that are looking at Libya through the frame of investment, but also through the frame of the Mediterranean. And we shouldn't forget that Russia on one side and Turkey on the other are extremely eager to get a military base in Libya and to have it as a springboard to have access to the Mediterranean. So that's one thing. The second thing that we have to look at is, as you mentioned, there were a slew of accords, even one signed in Morocco, that have not been respected. And unfortunately, Libya, like many other countries, has a political class and different tribal leaders that are willing to change sides on a whim. And it's a little bit like, the example of Lebanon, if you will, where, one day a politician is on one side, the other day is with another country. So at this point, if the international community were to respect as well what they signed, I think Libyans would be even more entitled to look at this and take it seriously. But there are a lot of investment and a lot of money at stake in getting Libya right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Your Excellency, Mrs. Delray, I'm going to ask you a quick question about the comments that you made. So in terms of the EU understanding the nature of the threats there and seeing a priority in terms of the humanitarian crises and aid crises that you mentioned, what do you think the next couple of years of policies look like? How do we improve those partnerships? How do we transition away from the clear priorities of today to guarantee the future that you spoke about, please?
Well, first of all, I want to say that it is true that Libya is central, but it is also true that without solid states in the Sahel, we can't go anywhere, because the cooperation must be guaranteed, and also, of course, only if we have stable countries we can proceed with our big projects that we have defined with our partners in the region. So, true that Libya needs to be stabilized, absolutely fundamental, and I have to make a comment on the title of this panel, because I don't like to put things in the negative way. I would have preferred to say, is pacification possible? But at the same time, I can say that in order to stabilize the countries of the Sahel, the European Union is particularly engaged in so what is actually called the return to the state, meaning investing very much in governance, in proper transition, investing in electoral processes, in creating opportunities to have access for the population to basic services, all things that would also resolve the problem of terrorism, because we know very well that, for instance, one of the strengths of terrorists is that of providing an alternative welfare state where the state is not capable of providing one. So in the end, what should the population do? The population is obliged to find solutions, especially the communities, in front of in some very serious problems that are affecting their everyday life. So stabilizing for us is the most important thing, and this is why in our strategy for the Sahel, the main political point is governance. And I think that this is absolutely fundamental.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, Mr. Mara, you spoke about a list that is very long and really pertinent. You mentioned the demographic explosions, the level of poverty and how this is creating a poverty valve, but you also mentioned the beauty of the Sahel. Culture, diversity, pluralism. What can Africa do and what can the West and Europe do? Please.
Je pense qu'avant de penser à ce que l'Europe ou l'Occident peut faire, c'est peut-être aux États africains, d'abord dans un premier temps, d'essayer de se réformer. Parce que je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, la crise à laquelle nous faisons face aujourd'hui est beaucoup plus due aux incapacités étatiques à faire face aux problèmes qu'aux chocs extérieurs. La Libye est importante. Et c'est vrai que ce qui est arrivé en Libye en 2011 a été un facteur de l'engrenage de la crise malienne. Mais ce qu'il faut savoir, c'est que les terroristes étaient présents 10 ans avant la crise libyenne sur le territoire malien. Les terroristes étaient présents 10 ans avant. Et aujourd'hui, le terrorisme auquel nous faisons face est beaucoup plus local qu'international. 95% des terroristes maliens aujourd'hui sont maliens de nationalité. Donc la question qui nous est posée, c'est notre aptitude à trouver des solutions internes à un problème qui est devenu interne. Le problème a commencé à l'extérieur et aujourd'hui il est devenu interne. Et cela est un élément très important. Et maintenant, cette aptitude à trouver des solutions internes, il peut y avoir des soutiens extérieurs pour l'identifier et puis pour la mettre en œuvre, pour faire le lien avec ce que Madame disait tout à l'heure.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for you to get involved. We've had an intimate panel. We've gone over them twice already. Now it's your time. If you have a question or a comment, please raise your hand. I'd love to hear from some people here in the front. But please raise your hand, introduce yourself, tell us your name, and ask your question or your comment. A microphone will be coming around. If you want to, we have a lady here in the front, in the second row. The microphone is there. Introduce yourself. And
hello, my name is Isabel Gouveia. I'm from the United States. And I have a question for Mr. Guitta specifically. Just a brief question, but you know, we know of the GCC members, UAE, Qatar. There's been some various frictions from 2017 to 2021 formally. But my question to you is, do you know of any frictions that are still currently happening in Libya between those two countries? And if you could just talk a little bit about that, that'd be great. Thank you.
if we have any other questions, maybe we can take a second one over here in the front, and then we'll come back to the panelists.
Docteur Abdelhafid Ouelalo, vice-président de l'Institut marocain des relations internationales. C'est un think tank indépendant au Maroc, un des plus grands think tanks au Maroc. C'est surtout les relations internationales qui nous intéressent le plus. La première question, comment expliquer l'incapacité des Nations Unies, alors qu'il y a un envoyé spécial tout dernièrement nommé, qui est sénégalais, pour trouver une solution africaine et non pas des autres pays que vous connaissez. Ça, c'est la première des choses. Deuxièmement, il y a tellement de congrès, de rencontres, depuis l'accord de Schirat en 2015 au Maroc, où nous avons constaté qu'il y a un accord, y compris sur les 7 grandes responsabilités au niveau de l'État. Et tout dernièrement, il y a quelques jours, il y avait la rencontre des 2 parlements à Rabat pour sortir de ce blocage. Comment vous expliquez l'échec de toutes ces rencontres alors que devant les caméras, tout va bien, il y a des rencontres, il y a des consensus, mais concrètement, c'est toujours un blocage. Et tout dernièrement, une petite question à notre dame. Quelle est la situation humanitaire en Libye actuellement? Parce que nous parlons beaucoup de la situation inhumaine des immigrés qui viennent de l'Éthiopie, de Somalie, du Tchad et de partout et qui malheureusement sont des cadavres au niveau de la Méditerranée parce qu'il y a une immigration clandestine très forte de la Libye vers l'Europe. Merci.
If we have a final question, a third question, I'm going to take this gentleman over here and then we'll come back for the second round. Please make your comments or your questions very brief, 1 minute. And introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Simpara Mahmadou, PhD candidate in international relations, and I'm from Mali. My question is addressed to His Excellency Moussa Mara. He said the problem, especially in Mali, became internal by the time. Since the problem is internal, how can we engage the ECOWAS organization in the process of resolving it? Who already did a lot in terms of economical integrations in the region? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we'll come back for another round. I'm going to start with Olivier and then we'll move forward. Okay?
Thank you for the question on the GCC. So basically, as you know, in order for all the countries of the GCC to get back together, there was a big compromise being done between Qatar and on one side and Bahrain, the UAE, and Saudi. The compromise was really to look at diffusing tensions and especially the role of the Muslim Brotherhood. Libya is one of those places where things are on the up and up in terms of pacification between the two sides, if you will. But Turkey has a big role to play. There was a deal made by Turkey with the UAE in order for the UAE to invest between 10 and $15 billion against Turkey, let's say, delivering some of the Muslim Brotherhood or kicking out some of the Muslim Brotherhood leadership. So the trend is towards a real pacification. So on that level, it's positive. that Qatar and the UAE are less at war in Libya, but it's just a matter of time for this to rekindle. I mean, there's too much interest on both sides, so probably after the World Cup we might see an uptick in tensions between the two countries. Thank you.
Well, we have gone very far, geographically speaking. So I prefer to return to my beloved Sahel and insist on the fact that, of course, everything is connected. So when we are talking about external interventions, for instance, of course, we have to talk about a principle that is for the European Union fundamental, which is ownership. And I also want to take some positive note because despite the very difficult situation, there are things that have been successful in terms of interventions also at local level, meaning reinforcing the local abilities and the local potential military structures that can respond to the threats by criminal and terrorist groups in general. And it is, for instance, I think the multinational joint force for the Lake Chad, which I have visited recently, and it's an interesting exercise that can be taken as an example. But I also want to respond to the question on migrations and human rights. Human rights are fundamental throughout the Sahel. We are very aware of that, and this is one of the reasons why when we talk about external interventions or external actors, such as, for instance, the Wagner Group, we have to be very careful in putting it in parallel with our interventions of the European Union, because in fact we are talking about a group which has no contracts, no real rules of engagement, and we have strong allegations of violation of human rights. In Libya, the European Union is very aware of the violation of human rights. We have evidences. This is something that is discussed very thoroughly. I think, because I've been involved in this very much, believing that we have to find solid solutions for migration, especially to avoid losing life in the Mediterranean and in the deserts, because it's all along the route. We have to rethink our way of approaching migration. I was discussing this yesterday with the Minister of Interiors of Morocco, and we were discussing the fact that we need to find ways to promote legal migration and find also ways of intervening at a local level in the countries of origin to allow the people to live a normal life. And this is why I was saying that the European Union is so involved in governance, to provide an opportunity for people to live a normal life. And normality, it's an achievement in the Sahel. Monsieur Moussamara le said très bien. It's something that we really need to work on, and the only way is by coordinating.
Bien. Vous parlez de l'intervention de la CEDEAO, mais l'intervention de la CEDEAO n'est pas vraiment en lien avec la question terroriste. L'intervention de la CEDEAO, c'est par rapport au changement non constitutionnel qui est intervenu dans notre pays en 2020, c'est-à-dire avec le coup d'État de 2020 et avec toutes les péripéties qui sont intervenues après. Donc l'intervention de la CEDEAO, c'est essentiellement en rapport avec ça. Mais pour répondre à une autre partie de votre question, c'est que jusqu'à aujourd'hui, nous n'avons pas encore, pour ce qui concerne le Mali, mais pour sans doute les différents pays, nous n'avons pas encore totalement compris ce que je suis en train de dire. C'est-à-dire que le terrorisme, ce n'est plus vraiment le terrorisme international, c'est le terrorisme national, souvent même local. Et même nos gouvernants n'ont pas vraiment compris. Et beaucoup de nos partenaires, c'est le cas par exemple de Barkhane encore aujourd'hui. L'échec de Barkhane, si on peut parler d'échec, s'explique par le fait que fondamentalement, on pense que seule la réponse armée permet de régler la question terroriste. On a employé des moyens, 1 milliard d'euros chaque année pendant 9 ans, pour aboutir à la conclusion que les moyens armés seulement ne suffisent pas. Et l'État malien est à peu près dans la même dynamique. Aujourd'hui, ceux qui dirigent le Mali aujourd'hui pensent la même chose. Le recours à la collaboration avec la Russie, ça participe du même principe, hein, c'est de dire qu'il faut tuer le maximum de terroristes possible. Si ça permettait de régler le problème, je pense que Barkhane l'aurait permis. Donc ça veut dire que, encore aujourd'hui, nos gouvernants, ce n'est pas seulement le Mali, n'ont pas encore compris que la donne terroriste n'est pas une donne internationale, n'est plus une donne internationale, c'est une donne nationale et locale, et elle n'est pas seulement une donne religieuse non plus. Vous avez parlé d'économie. Il y a des statistiques qui montrent que 50% des jeunes qui s'engagent dans les groupes terroristes le font simplement pour avoir des salaires. Ce n'est pas pour faire un califat ou ce n'est pas pour faire quoi que ce soit. Donc il faut que nous tenions compte de ces réalités et que nous arrivions à y apporter les réponses appropriées.
I'm going to pick up on two of these questions that were left at the end. So your question about Morocco's position in this. Morocco has offered its good offices. It's been an... Ça marche pas? So Morocco has been an honest broker and an honest convener of two different dialogues. First, the Skhirat process in 2015. Lately, the Buznika process that began in 2020. But you can't force individuals on different sides of this debate to come to a deal unless they are ripe for a deal. And I think this comes to the question that Olivier was answering in terms of, which may be a little bit overstated today, the GCC competition in Libya. That was a chapter between 2011 and 14. Today, the geopolitical axis is a more unusual one, because the question about what does the US want in Libya? We published a book, shameless plug here for Southwark Institute, called The Great Game, 10 Years of 10 Countries Transforming Libya into a Battle for Great Geostrategic Influence. The US has a rivalry with Russia in Libya today. And it's right at the southern flank of NATO, the way that Ukraine is on the eastern flank of NATO. The UAE has a problem with Turkey, and they both battled off for the last several years on the front lines of Tripoli. But we shouldn't forget, the UAE, according to the Pentagon, is funding the Wagner Group. And so I think this is where it becomes more complex. How do you disentangle PMCs, private military contractors, and mercenaries on both sides of this conversation, because they're not accommodated for in the law? There are no laws to try and stop them. I mean, it's all done through plausible deniability. That's going to be a major problem moving forward. And I think in light of what's happening in Ukraine, mediation efforts that were successful in 2015 are going to struggle in 2022 unless we start solving that problem. But I'm listening to all these different panels about Ukraine and how this is about a values-based, new war, almost like a World War III, that everything is up for grabs. But we shouldn't forget how Russia came into Libya. It was operating there with Europeans that were operating and launching a power grab. Burkina Faso and Mali, but also Libya, experienced the power grab in 2019. And I think that's where really this question was very pertinent about what the US position is, because it's still unclear. They have a rivalry with Russia, but they allowed and turned a blind eye. They gave a green light to that intervention on April 4th, 2019. So I'm going to leave my comments and keep them lacking, but I'm going to open it back up for another round of questions. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. I have a question over here from someone that I know, and then we're going to come over here. Please, young man.
Thank you.
Please. You can make a
Yes,
comment.
Can
Go
I
ahead.
just make a comment on what you just said regarding the Sahel and the presence of Mali? It's a different story. We have also to diversify our perceptions. Wagner in Mali for the European Union is a red line. Is a red line. Wagner in Libya, it's another story. I'm talking about the Sahel. So this is at the moment, the awareness, very strong awareness, is that Wagner, I said that to myself to President Guitta when I saw him the first time in September last year, and I repeated it to them, to him, to the Minister of Foreign Affairs repeatedly, because it is very important that there is an awareness of the danger. Maybe we learned from Libya. That's the thing, and also from Central Africa. But the thing is that we have to keep the pace with history, and history now requires that we are careful with Wagner and we really react to the presence of Wagner, because Wagner is doing no good to Mali, and especially is doing bad, which is even to be considered. Exactly.
Thank you so much. Hassan, please.
Hussein.
Hussein, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I study Hussein bin Sued. I study in Luxembourg University. I would like to ask you about the Sahel, the problem of security of the Sahel. There are many foreign forces in the Sahel looking for one objective, but at the same time they face the same result, failure. So I would like to ask first His Excellency Moussa Mara about, do you think we need to build or to create a security organization similar to the European Union, Europol or something, so we can deter some regional or security problems like terrorism and for sure separatism, etc. And for Her Excellency, do you think the European Union will support some kind of solutions or proposals, agencies to help the Sahel create its own security organization in respect to its political circumstances, etc.? Thank you.
Thank you. So let's go to a second question. Let's have that question from over here on the right-hand side, please. And then we're going to come back to you in the end, and then we'll come back to you. Let's try and keep it to 1 minute, please. Less than a minute, in fact.
Hello, my name is Yassine Al-Mokadam. I'm an independent consultant in the fight against terrorism financing and money laundering. And I have a question for the EU representative, Mrs. Del Rey. You were talking about the new emphasis of the European Union on the region in focusing in governance. Can you give us some figures about the amount of money that's invested in the region? And maybe if you could emphasize on the difference between with what was being spent before, like maybe 10 years ago. Are you able to convince your fundraisers in the European Union to spend much more than they used to? Thank you.
Let's come to a question over here at the back, please.
D'abord, j'aimerais bien saluer tous les intervenants pour l'intérêt qu'ils ont porté à cette réflexion humaniste et humanitaire. Au moment où vous dites que la sécurité au Sahel...
Vous appelez comment déjà?
Oui, je m'appelle Adnan Abdelrahman, professeur agrégé d'économie en classe préparatoire. Au moment où vous dites que la sécurité au Sahel est un bien public mondial, parfois on oublie dans la naïveté ou dans l'émotion que l'insécurité est un bien privé. L'insécurité est un bien privé qui profite à ceux qui ont édifié, qui profite à ceux qui l'ont accéléré. Maintenant, quels sont les vrais acteurs qui profitent effectivement de cette insécurité privée? Si on dit que l'insécurité au Mali ne profite pas à la France, on n'a rien compris. Si on dit que l'insécurité en Irak n'a pas profité aux États-Unis, on n'a rien compris. Maintenant, il y a ceux qui profitent de l'insécurité. Et ce qui est chagrinant et affligeant, c'est le moment où on fait de ceux qui profitent de l'insécurité des gendarmes. C'est le moment où...
Monsieur, posez une question, s'il vous plaît. Encore question, s'il vous plaît.
C'est juste pour terminer, pour poser le point d'interrogation. La question, elle est directe. Qui profite de l'insécurité? La rente insécuritaire, elle profite à qui exactement? C'est ça ma question. Merci.
Okay, dernière question.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Mounis Babdallah. Je suis étudiant en sciences politiques à l'université Al-Akhawayn, à Ifran. Et je voudrais savoir, pensez-vous que le développement durable est la solution au problème du terrorisme? Et quand je parle de développement durable, je parle plus précisément des générations futures. Pensez-vous que si on arrive à changer les mentalités des jeunes Africains, on pourra leur éviter de s'enrôler dans les organisations terroristes? Merci.
Merci à vous. Monsieur, oui.
Okay. Moi, je préfère ne pas me poser la question que vous posez, cher monsieur, à qui profite l'insécurité. Par contre, ce dont je suis sûr, c'est que je sais qui pâtit de l'insécurité. Les populations qui sont tuées, les populations dont on spolie les biens, les populations qui souffrent, ça je le vois. Pour ce qui concerne qui profite de l'insécurité, je ne le vois pas. Je pense que en cherchant des informations de ce type, on alimente beaucoup de théories et finalement on justifie le statu quo qui fait encore des morts, des morts et des morts. Il faut essayer d'avancer. Ce que moi je vois personnellement sur le terrain, c'est que la violence terroriste dont nous souffrons dans nos pays, il y a une partie qui est fondamentalement liée à notre incapacité à prendre conscience de la menace à laquelle nous faisons face et à faire les efforts qui nous reviennent pour essayer d'y faire face. Si vous avez suivi toutes mes interventions du début jusqu'à aujourd'hui, je suis plutôt focalisé sur nous-mêmes. Je trouve que penser que les acteurs extérieurs, les puissances extérieures, les grandes puissances, c'est eux qui créent et c'est eux qui doivent résoudre, c'est franchement nous minimiser nous-mêmes et nous infantiliser. Je pense qu'il faut que nous regardions nos propres responsabilités, et elles existent, et que nous essayons de prendre en compte nos propres responsabilités. Pour la question de est-ce qu'il y a une organisation militaire qu'on peut créer pour essayer de régler la question? Oui, il y en a eu une qu'on a créée. Ça s'appelle le G5 Sahel, c'est-à-dire les 5 pays membres de la zone sahélienne, du Tchad à la Mauritanie. Mais très rapidement, nous avons fait face à un problème de financement. Si vous avez suivi ces 6 dernières années, les pays sahéliens ont toujours cherché à obtenir un financement du G5 Sahel. Et ce financement n'était pas quelque chose de significatif, puisque c'est grosso modo 400 millions de dollars chaque année. Barkhane, c'est 1 milliard de dollars chaque année, par exemple. Et je ne sais pas ce qui est mis en Ukraine depuis 8 mois. Mais ces 400 millions de dollars n'ont pas été trouvés. Et donc, résultat, le G5 Sahel a eu des difficultés. Après, il y a eu des questions institutionnelles. Je pense que la collaboration entre les États est une bonne chose. Mais même cette collaboration entre les États, ça nécessite que chaque État, à l'intérieur, s'ajuste, se réorganise, utilise mieux les ressources dont il dispose pour faire en sorte que ces réponses armées, étatiques, administratives, économiques, il y a quelqu'un qui a parlé d'économie, soient les plus efficaces possibles. Et là encore aujourd'hui, ce n'est pas suffisamment fait. Il y a encore des efforts que les États sahéliens doivent faire en termes de gouvernance, en termes de soutien économique. Et ensuite, maintenant, on pourra parler plus des partenaires. Ça, c'est un peu mon angle d'intervention. Et cela n'est pas suffisamment encore pris en compte dans le Sahel aujourd'hui.
Your Excellency, please.
Oui, non, je vais commencer par la question du bien privé, la sécurité comme bien privé ou bien commun. Je dois dire qu'on doit insister que la sécurité est un bien commun. Parce qu'autrement, on va perdre le concept d'interdépendance et interconnexion qui anime notre volonté d'être engagé dans les Sahel. Alors c'est très important ce point parce que nous sommes conscients que la sécurité dans les Sahel est directement intéressée à notre sécurité et stabilité. Alors ça c'est quelque chose de vraiment important, c'est pour ça qu'on intervient beaucoup avec beaucoup d'argent. Et ça me porte à la question que quelqu'un a demandé sur l'entité de notre intervention. Notre intervention est très forte comme Union européenne. Nous sommes le premier partenaire du Sahel. On a investi des milliards dans les années passées et des milliards encore on va investir dans les années prochaines comme Union européenne et avec toutes les contributions aussi de Team Europe, ça veut dire tous les États membres qui, sur le plan bilatéral, interviennent et contribuent avec leur portfolio pour donner une stabilité et intervenir sur le plan aussi du développement. Le développement durable, oui, je pense que la durabilité sera le grand problème du futur. Et je vais me faire un compliment à notre jeune étudiant, je suis professeur à l'université, alors j'ai apprécié votre courage à demander ça, très intelligent, et je dois dire que pour les générations futures, ça serait le vrai défi, parce que vous avez besoin d'une accélération de l'histoire, vous avez besoin d'avoir des réponses concrètes, mais c'est à vous aussi de vous organiser et commencer à demander quelque chose de concret, de faire des propositions, et on attend que vous le faites. Et la dernière chose, la question du G5 aussi, si l'Union européenne va soutenir le G5 et les autres organisations régionales. Oui, peut-être pas trop, comme Moussamar a dit, mais notre volonté est là. On a la volonté de soutenir les organisations régionales, surtout pour garantir l'appropriation, qui pour nous est le principe inspirateur de toute notre action politique, parce qu'on voudrait voir, c'est un rêve, de voir des pays qui sont solides, qui peuvent vraiment manager leurs affaires sans notre intervention. notre appui comme de partenaires, parce que le partenariat, pour moi, c'est l'élément fondamental pour construire un futur commun. Ce n'est pas facile pour plusieurs raisons qu'on le sait, mais c'est vraiment les principes les plus importants sur lesquels on va baser notre action dans le futur. Merci.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Please, Mr. Guitta.
2 points quickly to take on the G5 Sahel and different international organizations. Unfortunately, all the different organizations that came in on the military side have been failures. The MINUSMA has 15,000 soldiers in the region, and some of them are not really active in providing security, and that goes to your question about what the youth can do. The problem is ungoverned spaces. We have now, in the past few months, jihadist group controlling much more of different countries, and the population, whether the youth or not, has no choice than to give in and to respond to the authority of the jihadist group, because the central government is not providing enough of network and infrastructure and help and water and electricity, and that's what His Excellency former Prime Minister of Mali said. It's a local issue that has to be tackled this way, but it's extremely difficult in terms of providing a solution on the infrastructure, for instance.
Please, Your Excellency.
No, I just want to make a note on the fact that I wouldn't want the audience to have the feeling that the syndrome of pessimism should animate all our approaches to the
Give us the
Sahel.
optimistic look.
No, I just want to say that apart from the huge problems, apart from the failures and the problems that have been caused also by foreign intervention, not perfect, some interventions not appropriate, and other things, the incapacity of the states to be to organize the governance and welfare state. Apart from this, within the Sahel, the internal dynamics are incredibly lively, and I want to say that this is the reason why I always find a lot of optimism, because there is a civil society very active, very aware, which needs to be supported, which needs to find ways of organizing itself, and also to be, let's say, the voice of all the needs that are very clear in the region and must be transformed in something concrete. So I would like to give you the impression that despite the problems, also at diplomatic level, myself, I do shuttle diplomacy, which means that I go from one country to the other. I speak to all the actors. With Musamara, we have met several times. We meet with all the leaders, but as well with the civil society. We meet with activists. We meet with international organizations on the terrain. If you look at the Sahel, it's an incredibly lively area in which everything happens. It's the center of the world at the moment, and it is also the most important dossier on the table of the European Union. We have to take from this energy. The problems are there, enormous, very sad situation, very frightening situation, especially for the food crisis and all that and other things, and terrorism. But at the same time, if we don't start talking also in a way by which we exploit the positive aspects, we don't go anywhere, because we have already found the solution. Failure, impossible, all these negative aspects. If we do this, it's the end of the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to come back to the audience for 2 last questions. Please raise your hand. We have a question over here. If there's any question on this side, let's take a question at the back, please. Introduce yourself and ask your question, please.
Bonjour, Nastra Miar de Tanger. La question est très simple. Quelle est la probabilité aujourd'hui d'avoir des changements de frontières d'ici une dizaine d'années à travers tous les conflits que nous vivons dans nos zones africaines, entre le Sahel et l'Afrique centrale? Merci.
Et votre question, c'est à qui? C'est à tout le monde?
Je crois que M. Marat est le mieux placé pour répondre à cette question. Merci encore.
Vous en prie. Is there a last question? Or can we come back to the audience? Okay. Monsieur Marat.
Je pense que la probabilité, elle est nulle. Parce que Au niveau de l'Union africaine et au niveau international, la question des frontières est une question qui est sensible. Et ce qui s'est passé avec le Sud-Soudan notamment a été une leçon que tout le monde a apprise. Parce que le Sud-Soudan, de son indépendance, récemment a été en guerre civile très violente. Et donc finalement, ceux qui étaient un peu les avocats de la division de certains États ont compris que ce n'est pas forcément la voie à suivre. Très sincèrement, je pense qu'il n'y a pas de risque de division des États, y compris en ce qui nous concerne. Maintenant, à l'intérieur des frontières, nos États doivent avoir l'intelligence de se déployer autrement, de manière à procurer les services dont les populations ont besoin et de manière à laisser les populations décider pour une grande part par rapport à leur avenir. Donc une profonde décentralisation, je pense que ça c'est un enjeu important. Le deuxième enjeu, nous devons faire des frontières des zones de convergence. Nous, notre ancien président dans le passé, Alpha Omar Konaré, il avait développé le concept de pays frontières. Parce que toutes les zones frontalières en Afrique sont des zones de convergence, ce n'est pas des zones de rupture. Les frontières sont artificielles. Il faut que nous ayons l'intelligence entre États voisins de travailler à créer des zones frontalières où les populations pourront aller et venir, voire même à créer des nationalités transfrontalières. Et là, nous arriverons à gérer la question frontalière, non pas comme un facteur de division, mais comme une source d'harmonie. Cela est un enjeu important, mais je suis optimiste.
Merci, Votre Excellency. Your Excellency, please, in a minute, give us your parting thoughts. What should the audience remember as they leave this room? Give us your parting thoughts on policies and your parting thoughts on
I've already
session.
given a note of optimism that is absolutely necessary, because we need to be all together, and I mean also the people in this room, in fighting against the terrorism, in finding political solutions, in finding military solutions. We have to be all together, because we know what the solutions are. We have an architecture already in place. We have the means, because the money has already been invested, not only by the European Union, but for instance by the United States and other actors. And therefore, I think that if we sit properly for a while and we reflect thoroughly, without being bound by the necessity to face the emergency, probably we can come to solutions. The solution is there. We only have to take it. I want to say one thing about the borders, which are fundamental, but I agree with Musamara, because I think that we have to talk more than borders of community, transborder communities. This is why I've organized, for instance, in 2 weeks, a big seminar in Tunis, together also with Libya, to talk about, and EUBAM, to talk about transborder communities, because they are the groups that can really cooperate. If you think about Azawad and other groups, we need to find solutions in terms of decentralization, a constitutional order, changes in the constitution and other things. So this is the thing. The last thing I want to say is, be careful. We are now in an historical moment in which the global order is at risk. This is why the European Union insists so much on the war in Ukraine. It's not a question of geographical proximity or something that concerns the European Union because it is on the same geographical area. It is because the global order is at risk, and this is why our African friends are supporting us, the majority of them, and this is why they understand that we need to work together for a proper equilibrium in the world, which is absolutely needed.
Thank you so much. Olivier, the last word's yours. Thank you.
Quickly, I'll focus and open up the floor to Ukraine and Russia and how it links up to the Sahel. Europe, that wants to be free of dependence on Russian gas, is looking at 2 large projects to double imports from Nigerian gas. And there are 2 projects competing, one that goes through Morocco and one that goes through Algeria. The one that goes through Algeria goes through Niger and the Sahel, where in some of the areas where the jihadists are very strong. It is, as His Excellency and Her Excellency said as well, in the interest of each one of us to make the Sahel a peaceful and prosperous place, in order, in the case of Ukraine, for instance, to have a win-win solution whereby Nigeria would be able to export gas to Europe? Thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the panel. Before we finish, I want to thank our distinguished and amazing panelists for such an amazing, amazing conversation. His Excellency Mr. Musamara, Her Excellency Mrs. Del Rey, and Mr. Guitta. And also yourselves in the audience, thank you for asking and engaging in such a positive way. I look forward to seeing you in the next session. And thank you very much. The floor is all yours. Thank you. Give them a round of applause. Thank you.